Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto married with Masane Amaha, part 1. Subscribe if you enjoy the video, let's start the story. Prologue. He didn't know how exactly he had gotten into his current situation, or what caused it for that matter. At the time, 16-year-old Naruto Uzumaki was with his mentor, Jiraiya the Gamasenin, heading towards Konohagakure after being away on a training trip for nearly 3 years, in order to prepare for Akatsuki. One moment, it was a beautiful day. The sun was shining brightly, and there was a small gentle breeze that occasionally flew through their hair. The next, total pandemonium. At least, that was what it felt like for the blonde. Out of nowhere, several dark storm clouds appeared in the sky, covering the sun and engulfing everything in a complete overcast. The wind became unbelievably strong, kicking up dirt at blinding speeds and pulling trees out from the ground. Lightning struck at a rapid pace, almost coming close to frying the two shinobi on several occasions, followed by loud deafening blasts of thunder. Hirosenin. What the hell is going on? Shouted Naruto, trying to project his voice over the loud commotion. Your guess is as good as mine, Naruto. Jiraiya yelled back. But that's not important right now. We need to find shelter from this free calamity before we can even think of what could have caused this mess. But that was easier said than done. With winds that were almost as strong as a hurricane, combined with the chain lightning shooting towards the ground at random intervals, the two shinobi were hard-pressed to maneuver around the dangers that were thrown at them. They had been trekking through the horrible weather for what seemed like an eternity when Jiraiya spotted a cave that was dug into a cliffside. Naruto, let's head inside that cave over there. It'll be much better than trying to make it. Jiraiya was abruptly cut off when a bolt of lightning struck the spot where he was about to step forward. A great geyser of earth exploded upwards, sending the Gamasenin flying back as the earth in shrapnel and stray sparks from the bolt rendered him unconscious before he hit the ground. Hirosenin! Exclaimed Naruto, quickly running to his sensei's side. The man had mild bruises and electric burns all over his body. Locks of his white, spiky mane were rigidly sticking out like some sort of porcupine, and Naruto could have sworn that he saw the occasional electric spark dart between two strands. His appearance would have looked comical if it weren't for the dire situation they were in. Another flash of lightning and boom of thunder quickly got Naruto's attention back on track. Not wasting a moment, Naruto threw one of Jiraiya's arms over his shoulder and proceeded to make his way to the cave. Once he had gotten the both of them out of the storm, the blonde gently placed the Sennin down in order to get a better idea of his current condition. Placing his index and middle fingers on his jawline, Naruto let out a sigh of relief once he found out that his teacher still had a steady pulse. He then withdrew a kunai and positioned it in front of the man's nostrils, happy to see its metal surface get fogged up, indicating that Jiraiya was indeed breathing. This is just great. We're about a half-day's travel from the village before this freak storm hit us, and there's no way that we can head back to the town we just passed. Plus, there's no way that we can travel with this apocalyptic storm going on. TCH, Hirosenin's right, I am a magnet for trouble. Naruto muttered to himself. Since he had no training in medical ninjutsu, he tried to patch up his mentor as best as he could using the medical supplies that he had on hand. Once he was satisfied with his work, he summoned a messenger toad named Konosuke and asked him to relay their current predicament back to the Hokage. He made sure that he emphasized to the toad that Jiraiya was alright but would still need a professional medic to examine him once they had returned to the village. As soon as Konosuke left, Naruto was left alone with his unconscious teacher, all the while listening to the storm howl outside. In an attempt to alleviate his stress, he began to let his eyes wander around their temporary shelter. He had to admit that he found the cave a bit unsettling for some reason, as if there was something supernatural hidden within it. His wandering eyes soon took notice of how the walls of the cave seemed to have some type of runes carved into them, and they weren't like any kanji that he'd ever seen before. Seeing this as an opportunity to help take his mind off things, he withdrew a glow stick from his pouch and cracked it on to get a better view of the mysterious characters. From the green glow, he was able to see that the runes ran deeper into the cave, all the way to the very end. Well, I guess it wouldn't hurt to have a little look around. Naruto murmured to himself. But, as he walked deeper into the cave, he noticed that there were a few hieroglyphics that appeared in the middle of the runes sporadically. They depicted what seemed like an armored man, wielding a sword that fought off and defeated several monstrous creatures. They also depicted the man and a sword-wielding armored woman fighting off a horde of demonic feminine-looking creatures, as well. But the last one was what really perplexed him, as it depicted the man and woman suspended in mid-air, their swords crossed together, and what seemed to be light encompassing them. All in all, it just made Naruto more curious and perhaps a bit wary of the cave. For all that he knew, this very cave could have been the tomb of an ancient warrior. That thought soon gave way to fear as he thought about how tombs that looked similar to this cave had several superstitions of being cursed or haunted. Despite all of the changes that he went through, his fear of the supernatural and spirits still seemed to stay with him. His mind was so preoccupied with his little haunted tomb freakout session that he didn't notice the patch of unsettled gravel in front of him. The moment Naruto's foot landed on that specific spot, the ground immediately gave way, sending the blonde hurtling down a large tunnel. The only piece of evidence that he was even with Jiraiya was his glow stick laying on the ground in front of the hole. Naruto, on the other hand, was scared out of his mind. Gruesome and horrific scenarios played through his mind as he continued his downward descent, twisting and turning to the point that it felt like he was on some deranged playground slide. But he didn't have to wait long for the dreadful experience to end when he finally hurtled out the tunnel and into a large underground cavern that was filled with about 4 inches of water. Sputtering from the sudden intake of water, Naruto clambered up on top of the water's surface to get a better look at his surroundings. The interior was completely dark, which prompted Naruto to take out another glow stick and crack it open, flushing the entire area with its green fluorescence. Water covered the entire area, leaving no trace of visible land. But what really stood out was a large stalagmite that was jutting out smack dab in the middle of the small pool. And, as he peered closer, it seemed as if there was something carved into it. Well, that's not peculiar at all," was Naruto's sarcastic remark. Yet, he couldn't help but let his curiosity sway him into investigating the earthen construct anyway. As he approached closer, he noticed that the carving was that of a gauntlet-clad arm, holding a long double-edged sword pointed toward the ceiling. The sword had a cross-shaped hilt, with an orange-yellow jewel molded into the pommel. Strange tentacle markings that looked similar to tree roots were coiled around the gauntlet and reached up to the sword's hilt, giving off the appearance of what a cross-section diagram of a normal tree would look like. Okay, this is just weird. Still, whoever crafted this little number sure knows his stuff. He inched his face closer to the stone sculpture, but was surprised when the gemstone seemed to glow for a brief moment. Leaning back in surprise, he saw it glow again for a slightly longer moment. What the hell? Then without warning, the gemstone shone with great intensity, as if it were the sun itself. Naruto clenched his eyes shut from the sudden bright onslaught, trying to put as much distance between himself and the bizarre light show. But then it all took a drastic turn for the worse, as the light that seemed to be contained within the gemstone slowly phased out of its container, expanding until it was large enough for a giant boulder to easily fit through it. Things went further south for the boy when he felt himself being pulled towards a strange phenomenon, like water being sucked down a drain. He tried to get out of the glowing orb's path, but he discovered to his horror that the pull on him was drastically hampering his mobility. It felt like gravity-resistant seals were placed on his limbs and on their highest setting. Gradually, Naruto found himself being pulled closer and closer towards the orb until he was about a centimeter away from touching it. The moment he made contact with a strange sphere of light, his vision was assaulted by a bright flash of white. MOTB. After what seemed like hours of being in a bright incoherent limbo, Naruto was able to make sense of his surrounding environment. But what he saw once his vision cleared wasn't what he had expected. Gone was the mysterious cave that he and Jiraiya had taken cover in, and in its place was what looked like a massive city. But it was no city that he had ever seen, and it looked as if it went through a massive catastrophe. Wrecked and dilapidated buildings surrounded him, whilst the ground that he was sitting on was severely ruptured and upheaved, hinting that a massive earthquake had occurred. Rubble was strewn everywhere, mainly consisting of pieces from the buildings. But the clincher for the blonde was the massive flooded area that engulfed what he assumed to be another part of the devastated city. The dead silence throughout the derelict area only added to Naruto's steadily growing dread. "Dear Kami, what happened to this place?" whispered Naruto as he got up to better survey the damage. "Then again, I don't have a clue as to where I am exactly. But I guess the more important question I should be worried about is how the hell did I even get here in the first place?" Suddenly, a woman's scream pierced through the silence. It was close and seemed to have come from within a ruined building to his right. Wasting no time, Naruto raced into the structure through the gaping hole that was on its side. Maneuvering around inside, however, was more difficult than he had first imagined, as the interior was just as jumbled up and destroyed as the streets were. The jagged piles of rubble that littered the ground gave off the illusion of a large labyrinth that scientists used to test lab rats, except instead of a piece of cheese that was waiting for him at the end, there was a frightened and distressed woman. "Help me. Please, somebody help." And from the sound of things, she didn't have much time left. Straining himself to his fastest speed possible, he leaped over the last rubble pile and was met with a sight that made him shudder. There before him was a young woman sprawled on the ground, wearing some sort of clawed gauntlet on her right arm that had a red jewel on the dorsal side of her hand. But the most alarming part was that several thin red tentacles were emerging from the gauntlet and they were already coiled around the woman's body from her legs to her head. The tentacles were waving around as if they were alive and looked as if they were going to continue coiling around her until she resembled a mummy. "Hold on." shouted Naruto as he ran towards the woman, withdrawing a kunai from his pouch. His hand shot towards the strands that were obstructing her mouth and nose and pulled as hard as he could. The tentacles had a cold metallic feel to them, and he felt small barbs dig into his palms, but he kept his grip strong. When he brought up his kunai up to cut them off, the woman's muffled screams and struggling renewed in vigor, which in turn made the tentacles move more erratically. Hey, hey, hey. Calm down. I'm trying to help you. Just keep still, and I'll get these things off you. He shouted, his blue eyes gazing into her hazel ones determinedly. Without waiting any longer, he pulled the bound tentacles far enough to allow for his kunai to safely cut away the obstruction, before he grabbed another mass coiled around her neck and chest and hacked it off, as well before he repeated the action again and again. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Exclaimed the hysterical woman in between frightened sobs. Yet despite her fright, she saw a small glimmer of hope as she watched Naruto hack away at her binds. But that glimmer was immediately extinguished once she spotted a stray tentacle snake its way behind her savior and poise itself similar to a king cobra that was about to strike. Look. Was all that she managed to say before a fresh group of tentacles coiled around her mouth to prevent her from warning the blonde of the danger. The muffled noise did, however, alert Naruto of the woman's predicament. Oh shit, not again. Just bear with me, I'll get it off ya. Naruto's right hand made to rip the thin strand-like tentacles of the woman's face once again, which was exactly the moment that the poised tentacle was waiting for. Without a sound, it struck at surprisingly high speeds, the spear-tipped end piercing through Naruto's wrist before it ripped through the other side and coiled itself around his arm, just stopping beneath his elbow. Son of a bitch. His arm felt as if it had been submerged in molten steel. Naruto tried to pull the foreign red substance off, but before he could even touch it, another tentacle coiled itself around his other hand, keeping it away from his arm. Soon enough, the tentacles began to wrap around the blonde's body at a rapid pace until he was in a similar situation as the woman he was trying to save. Naruto could barely move as more and more tentacles encompassed his entire body, the pain increasing exponentially with each passing second. The last thing that he recalled before he lost consciousness was looking into the woman's frightened eyes and faintly hearing a baby crying behind him. Neither of the two victims noticed the red gemstone on the woman's arm crack, and a fragment broke away from the gauntlet before the stone restored itself to its original pristine condition. Nor did they notice the free fragment morph into orange-yellow orb before it placed itself on Naruto's own wrist. MOTB. What the hell? What caused me to black out? Were the first thoughts of the whiskered blonde as he slowly regained consciousness and his vision slowly cleared itself. But whatever it was, it obviously wasn't strong enough to take me out. Wait a minute, just who am I? I can't remember. Oh shit, I've forgotten my own name. That thought alone got the blonde reinvigorated as he quickly shot up in an upright position. But in doing so, he unintentionally flexed his right arm, sending a sharp jolt of pain through the limb. Looking down to see what was the cause of the mild discomfort, he was shocked to see blood slowly dripping from wounds on both sides of his wrist. It looked as if the injury was nearly healed, but it still pained him whenever he moved his hand. Ow. Damn it, how did this happen? He was about to try and apply pressure to the injury to try and lessen the pain when he felt something fall off his forehead and land on the ground with a clatter. Looking down, he saw that it was some sort of long black cloth. In the center of it was a rectangular metal plate that had a spiral-like leaf design etched into it. Picking it up and turning it around in his hands, he noticed that there was a small message inscribed on the back of the cloth, where the leaf pattern would be on the front side of the plate. If found, please return this to Naruto Uzumaki, the future Hokage of Konohagakure. Naruto Uzumaki. Is that my name? The now identified Naruto wondered aloud. And just what the hell is a fire shadow anyways? All the same, he pocketed the weird trinket, considering that it was currently the only clue he had to his identity. As he stood up to get a better idea of where exactly he was, he got a better look at his outward appearance for the first time. Open-ended sandals, a dirty black t-shirt, a battered orange and black jacket, and orange pants. Why in the world am I wearing orange pants? And what the, a shuriken holster? Just what the hell am I? And what was I doing here? Naruto's thoughts ground to a halt the moment he saw the area surrounding him. From the way the walls of rubble were strewn around him, to the fact that the ground he was standing on was the floor of a small crater, the entire scene gave off the impression that he was at ground zero from where a bomb had gone off. But that couldn't have been what had happened, otherwise he wouldn't be alive. As he continued to theorize on what had happened, he heard the sound of a baby crying somewhere close to his position. For reasons he couldn't understand, it seemed faintly familiar. Racing towards the origin of the sound, he saw there was indeed a crying baby laying on the ground. From the pink blanket that was wrapped around its body, it was easy enough to determine the baby's gender. A few feet away from the infant was a young, brown-haired woman that was face down on the ground. Already fearing the worst possible outcome, Naruto was quickly by the woman's side, his index and middle fingers pressed against the spot where her jugular vein was. He gave a small sigh of relief when he felt a slow, steady pulse push against his fingers. That relief was short-lived, as the baby's cries continued. Hey. Hey miss. He nudged her shoulder to try and stirred the woman awake. Miss, are you alright? Can you hear me? His efforts were rewarded with a murmur from the woman, and he saw that her eyelids began to twitch. Miss, you have to wake up. Your baby needs why. Almost instantly, the young woman shot up and raced towards the crying babe, knocking Naruto to the ground in the process. Whilst she was attempting to calm the distressed infant, Naruto managed to get a better look at the woman. She seemed to be about an inch shorter than him and looked about 17 or 18 years old. Her brown hair was in a short-cut style with bangs that framed her face, but he noticed that the hair on the back of her head was long enough that it reached the middle of her neck. He found it odd how the two strands of hair stood out on the top, making them look like a seagull flying in the horizon. She had the very definition of an hurdless figure. Large B-mid-C cup breasts, a thin waist, and well-rounded hips. Her sleeveless blouse and miniskirt were just as ragged and weathered as his own clothes were, which made him realize that she was possibly with him at ground zero of whatever disaster had struck. Deciding to hold off on asking if she knew what had happened for a later date, his attention refocused on the woman that was trying in vain to soothe the baby's crying. From her expression, it looked as if she was becoming more frantic by each passing second. Excuse me miss. The woman's attention quickly turned towards him, her hazel eyes locking onto him. Her stance shifted slightly, as if she were preparing to run off at any moment. Who are you? What do you want? She asked with an edge. She unconsciously pressed the wailing babe closer to herself in a protective manner. Naruto placed his hands in front of him in a placating manner, just to show her that he wasn't going to hurt them. Hey now, I mean you two no harm miss. If I wanted to, I could have ended your life whilst you were still unconscious. The fearful look the young mother displayed made Naruto realize that he probably shouldn't have said that last statement. That doesn't answer my questions. Who are you, and what do you want? She repeated. Well, first of all, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, or at least I think it is. And secondly, I couldn't help but notice that you were having some trouble with your baby, and I thought that you might want some help. The woman's eyes narrowed at him. Why would you want to help me? I've never seen or heard of you until now, and you just so happen to be around here. How do I know that you're not going to try and pull something the moment I hand you this baby? Naruto's expression turned somber. He didn't understand why, but hearing the baby's cries brought up a torrent of emotions within him. Brief but blurry images bombarded his mind, all of them depicting a large crowd gathered in front of a small boy with blonde hair. He couldn't see their faces clearly, but he could tell that the group of adults were glaring hateful at the boy, who was crying pitifully by himself. The vision felt so familiar, but he couldn't think of a reason why. I can't explain why, but I just can't bear to hear a child cry. To me, it's the saddest sound ever imaginable. He answered solemnly, the woman's gaze softening somewhat. Besides, I can tell from your posture and your tone that you could use a little break right about now. And like magic, the scrutinizing gaze was back. Look, I just want to help the two of you out. I swear in my life that I will not cause any harm to the baby, alright? The mother gazed intently at Naruto, as if she were trying to stare into his soul and search for any trace of ill intent. Yet with each passing second of listening to the fussy baby cry, she could literally feel her already frazzled endurance and patience grinding away. Finally, with a sigh of defeat, she slowly approached the blonde. When she was about an inch away from him, she slowly and carefully held the baby out for him. Naruto moved incautiously to take the baby girl into his own arms, but was surprised when he felt the woman grasp his jacket sleeve in a strong grip and jerk him closer to her. I'll be watching you the whole time you're holding her. If I see you doing anything to hurt her, I'll make sure that the rescue teams never find your body, got it? Her low tone promised pain and suffering, making Naruto involuntarily shudder. I understand. Said Naruto, trying to be as calm as possible so as not to upset the baby even further. Satisfied with his answer, the woman reluctantly released her hold. It's okay, little one. Don't cry, don't cry. Everything's going to be alright. He said, as softly as he could, while slowly rocking the babe back and forth in calm, gentle sways. At first the woman was unimpressed with Naruto's actions, as she watched him continue his soft whisperings and gentle rocking. She was about to demand that he give her back the baby when she noticed the infant's cries begin to quell until gradually they stopped completely. There, that's a lot better, isn't it? Cooed Naruto, to which the baby just giggled in response. How did you do that? Asked the woman, disbelievingly. I was doing the exact same thing you were doing, and yet you managed to calm her in mere seconds. What's your secret? Naruto adopted a thoughtful expression before he finally shrugged. I dunno, exactly. I guess I have a way with kids, or something like that. Or, maybe this little one could tell how stressed you were. I mean, from what I've seen from you, you seem like you're a kind person and it looked like you were doing everything right. I guess the reason she was so fussy was because she was really spooked by what happened here and your panic state just made her feel more stressed. But she seems fine now, do you want her back? The woman nodded. As she walked back towards Naruto to take the baby back into her arms, with Naruto reminding her to keep calm so as not to distress the infant, she was soon cradling the new life in her arms once again. Except this time, the baby girl wasn't crying. Instead, she was gazing curiously up at the young woman. Thank you for your help, Naruto. And I'm sorry that I came off as a bit antagonistic earlier. She said sincerely. Naruto just smiled. Hey, don't worry about it. You were just being a good mother, looking out for your baby. I was happy to help, Ms. Oh geez, this is embarrassing. I don't think that I got your name, or your baby's name for that matter. Said Naruto sheepishly. The woman's expression quickly turned depressed, instantly catching Naruto's attention. I can't remember my name. I don't even know how I got here, let alone this baby's name. Hell, I don't even know if she's even mine. Naruto was about to apologize for bringing the matter up when he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. It was near the same exact spot that he had first seen the baby and it was covered by chunks of rocks and concrete. Knocking away the rubble, the object was revealed to be a small pink notebook. What's this? Naruto said to himself. The woman, having overheard Naruto, looked at what the blonde was holding before something clicked in her mind. That looks like a maternity diary. Maybe it belongs to this little girl. She suggested as she stepped closer to look over his shoulder. His curiosity stoked, he opened the book and read its contents aloud. According to what's written, this diary is for Ryuhoko Amaha. Said Naruto as he briefly gazed at the baby. And it also says that Ryuhoko's mother is Masane Amaha. Huh, that's strange, it doesn't list who her father is. Masane Amaha sounds so familiar. Is that my name? And does that make Ryuhoko my daughter? Well, maybe. You and Ryuhoko were about a few feet away from each other when I came here. And when you woke up, your very first action was to check and see if Ryuhoko was alright, just like any parent would. But, shouldn't I at least remember Ryuhoko's name if I'm her mother? I can't even remember my own name, and I'm not sure if it's even Masane. The woman said, almost scaring Ryuhoko once again. Hey, settle down. I wasn't saying that you are Masane Amaha, I'm just saying that the current situation heavily hints that you are. I mean, I can't think of any other reason why Ryuhoko would be out here all on her own. Unless, you don't think that a real mother just abandoned her, do you? The face the woman made showed him what she thought of that idea. I don't even want to think about that. Just the thought of a parent leaving their baby to die, it's just too cruel. I want to believe that I'm Ryuhoko's mother, but at the same time I don't think that I can be the mother that she needs. I mean, look at me. Do I really look like I'm cut out to be a mother? The woman's voice was growing increasingly desperate and she looked as if she were close to tears. I do. Said Naruto, making her eyes snap to him. I think that you would make a great mother. You've already proven that you're dedicated, loving, and protective over little Ryuhoko. I believe those are qualities that every mother should have. But what if Ryuhoko's real mother is still out there? What if, then to hell with her? Interrupted Naruto, surprising the woman. If she allowed herself to become separated from Ryuhoko, especially during this disaster, then she doesn't deserve to be her mother. Parents should always put the safety and needs of their children before their own, only leaving them when it's the only way to protect them. And if this woman thought that leaving Ryuhoko out in this wasteland would protect her, then she's got no right to be a parent. All that I know is that right now, you are the only one that Ryuhoko can depend on. Naruto cupped the woman's cheek, making the woman look into his eyes as he gently brushed his finger underneath her eye to wipe away the lone tear. As far as I'm concerned, you are Ryuhoko's real mother. You are Masane Amaha. So don't be so quick to doubt yourself, alright? Masane just stood there, stunned at hearing Naruto speak so passionately. She didn't know what to say. After all, she had just met this Naruto character only a minute ago. And if that wasn't enough, it seemed that he too had lost nearly all his old memories, with his name being the only exception. But at the same time, she couldn't help but feel drawn to him like a moth to a flame. It was as if he were radiating with confidence and just being around him brightened her outlook on things. In the end, she just couldn't help but smile. Thank you, Naruto. I guess I needed that pep talk to get me thinking straight. Said Masane. He smiled in return, making Masane think of a fox. Don't worry about it. We amnesiacs have to stick together, right? A sudden noise brought their attention to the bundle Masane held in her arms. The day's events seemed to have been too much for Ryuhoko to handle as she yawned and promptly fell asleep. Her actions were just so adorable that both Naruto and Masane couldn't help but let out a quiet laugh at the baby's actions. As Masane readjusted her grip on Rihoko, Naruto took notice of the bleeding injury that was on her right wrist and the small trickle of blood that ran down her forehead. "Hey, Masane, what happened to you? How did you get those injuries?" he asked while gesturing to the bleeding areas using his own body. Shifting Rihoko so that she could free her right arm, she gingerly touched her forehead and felt something wet and sticky making contact with her finger. Pulling back the digit, she saw that blood was smeared on her fingertip. It also gave her a chance to notice the bleeding wound that was on her wrist. She was surprised that she hadn't noticed them earlier and wondered just how she had gotten them. She was quickly brought out of her thoughts when she heard the sound of tearing fabric in front of her. Looking up, she saw that Naruto had ripped off one of the sleeves of his t-shirt into 3 strips before he wrapped one around her wounded wrist, securing it with a simple knot. "Wait, Naruto, you don't need to do that," protested Masane. Naruto just ignored her as he used a second strip to wipe the trail of blood off her forehead. "Look, don't worry about it. This thing's already ripped up, so it might, as well, be used for more important things," he said before he used the last cloth to wrap around his own bleeding wrist. Masane just stared at the cloth on her wrist before she smiled once again. "Well, he certainly knows how to treat a lady. Not to mention he's kinda cute, especially with those whisker marks," she thought, blushing slightly once she realized that she thought a person she had just met was cute. "I guess I'm pretty lucky that I came across Naruto." Suddenly, they heard a loud commotion from up in the sky, growing louder and louder with each second. A sudden gust of wind blew through the area, followed by a bright light that shined down on them. As soon as Masane's eyes refocused from the sudden burst of light, she saw to her relief that it was a rescue chopper that was undoubtedly looking for survivors. She looked towards her fellow survivor, but was perplexed as to why Naruto looked panicked, as if he were seeing something horrible. "What the hell is that thing?" he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the flying vehicle. Masane looked from Naruto to the helicopter in the air, then back at Naruto. "You mean the helicopter?" she asked, innocently. "Helicopter, is that what it's called? How the hell is it staying in the air like that?" His tone was more panic-stricken than what she had expected, and he even began to tremble as the copter began to descend to a lower altitude. He doesn't know what a helicopter is. Man, his amnesia must be even worse than mine, thought Masane as she led the frightened Naruto closer to the helicopter, all the while assuring him that the vehicle wasn't going to hurt him in any way. MOTB. After an embarrassing helicopter ride, in which Masane had held his hand in order to help put him at ease, Naruto found himself at a large relief center that was teeming with medical and rescue personnel, as well as survivors. From what he gathered, a massive earthquake had struck in the middle of this country called Japan, killing several thousands of people, as well as injuring several hundreds more and causing massive property damage everywhere. The very relief center that he was staying with Masane was actually a large shopping center, as the hospital in the area wasn't big enough to fit the scores of people that needed medical attention. Currently, Masane and Rihoko were being attended to by one of the many doctors that were bustling about. They were in a little room that was part of the building structure, which had been set up specifically for women to have physical examinations and to address any injuries that they might have sustained. Naruto, who already had a doctor examine him, was leaning up against one of the room's outer walls, waiting for Masane and Rihoko to be cleared. As he waited, his mind kept replaying the scenes of total devastation that he had seen from the helicopter and the sight of seeing so many people with more severe injuries when he had first entered. It just seemed too surreal to the blonde, almost like a massive war had recently taken place. The sound of footsteps brought him back to reality and saw 2 stern-looking policemen, the same 2 he had seen earlier when he and Masane were first interviewed by the head of the center, making their way towards him. But judging by their strides and the scowls on their faces, he had a feeling that they weren't coming to have a friendly chat with him. "You, come with us," said the lead officer. Naruto blinked in surprise, not expecting the policeman to be so straightforward. Excuse me." The guard's frown deepened. "Didn't you hear me? I said come with us, now. Did I do something wrong, sir?" This time it was the second officer that spoke up. "Don't ask stupid questions. Just come with us, right now." Warning bells began to go off inside Naruto's head. Something didn't seem right with the way the guards were acting. "Well, can you at least tell me why I'm being called away? I want to at least let my friend in there know that the police need me for something," he said as he gestured to where Masane was. The head officer scowled, an action which was mirrored by his fellow policeman. "As if you have the right to even speak to her." "What was that?" growled Naruto, his mood souring greatly and his patience with the 2 wearing dangerously thin. "You heard me, punk. Japan has experienced a natural disaster which we've never seen before. Our medics and emergency provisions are already being pushed to the limit and there could be hundreds more survivors out there waiting to be helped. We don't need some damn freeloading gaijin wasting our valuable time and resources that could be used to help other people that truly deserve it." "What?" roared Naruto. He didn't understand what a gaijin was, but he had a feeling that it was meant to be an insult. The second officer marched up to him, a sneer plastered on his face, as he looked at Naruto with disdain. Don't bullshit us, gaijin. Tan skin, blonde hair, blue eyes. Why, you're practically the poster boy for gaijins everywhere. Judging on your appearance, I'd wager that you're either some alcoholic, self-righteous German or an arrogant American pig. Hell, I bet you came all the way from America just because of your manga or hentai addiction, since according to you Americans, those are the only good things that our country produces. Hami, you damn weeaboos all make me sick, prancing about in your cosplay outfits, reenacting fight scenes from video games in front of company buildings, thinking that you're embracing our culture or some other bullshit. Naruto's anger finally snapped. He already had enough on his plate, what with the loss of his memories, and he did not need to deal with these two bigoted officers, as well. Now you listen here, you asshole. I am not a gaijin or weeaboo or whatever you think I am. You have no right to waltz up here to yell in my face and treat me like shit just because of my looks. And if you two really cared about helping the citizens, then why the fucking hell are you two wasting time trying to accuse me of being something I'm not when you could be out assisting others that truly need help? That seemed to only make the officers angrier as the one in front of him grabbed him roughly by the front of his shirt. Don't you dare lecture us on how to do our jobs, gaijin. You shouldn't even be here, you damn parasite. And if you are Japanese, then where's your identification? You know, like a driver's license, student ID card, the sort of things that show that you belong here. Oh, that's right. You conveniently lost them, as well as most of your memories. Do you really expect us to believe that sort of crap? Snarled the officer. The other policeman just smirked darkly at the blonde as he took out a pair of handcuffs and showed them to Naruto in a taunting manner. Well, don't worry, we're going to take care of you, personally. We got a nice little cell bunker with your name on it down at the station, gaijin. So if I were you, I'd get Hey. Just what the hell do you two think you're doing? Interrupted an enraged feminine voice. Looking towards the entrance of the enclosed section, they saw one Masane Amaha, looking extremely pissed off. She had a swath of bandages wrapped around her injured wrist and a square cloth patch held against her forehead by adhesive medical tape. Rihoko was in her arms, miraculously still asleep despite Masane's shouting. Behind her stood the physician, looking very displeased at the police officers. Well, answer me. What the hell are you two doing to him? The officer holding the handcuffs stepped in front of his partner, obstructing Masane's view of Naruto, and smiled at the young woman in a friendly manner. Ma'am, this is a matter of national security, nothing for you to worry about. Please, go back inside, my partner and I. Actually, I too would like an explanation. Interrupted a cool monotone voice from behind the amassed group. Turning to his right, Naruto saw a tall man with graying hair and dark brown eyes standing before them. He wore a dead serious expression on his face and was clad in a formal police uniform. The imposing front that this man gave off made Naruto tense, but the two policemen seemed to be outright terrified at the mere sight of the newcomer. Superintendent. What are you doing here? Asked the officer that was still holding on to Naruto's jacket. He flinched when the superintendent's gaze shot towards him and his partner, making their trembling increase. I was making my rounds, inspecting how my men are handling the security of this relief center, when I heard a loud and unruly commotion. Yet when I went to investigate, I ended up finding you two at the center of the disturbance, yet again. So I am only going to ask you two once. What the hell is going on here? I'll tell you what's going on. Interjected Masane, before either of the officers could utter a word. These two racist pigs were harassing this man whilst I was being treated. I heard everything through the door, they were calling him a gaijin and other racial slurs just because he had blonde hair and blue eyes. They were planning on arresting him on the grounds of being in this country illegally, all because he doesn't look like the stereotypical Japanese man. It's true, sir. I was treating Ms. Amaha when I heard these two scoundrels trying to apprehend this man. Their behavior has been absolutely despicable. Added the female doctor. Is that so? Said the superintendent, his eyes focusing on the two cops once again, who were quaking in their shoes. His eyes quickly shifted over to Naruto, taking in his appearance, before he turned his attention back to Masane. To be honest, he doesn't exactly look like he's from around here at first glance. Tell me, do you know this man on a personal level, ma'am? Of course I do. His name is Naruto Uzumaki. He was with me the entire time from when we were lost at the damaged east sector to when we were rescued. He's also the father of my daughter, Rihoko. She finished with the utmost certainty. Naruto was surprised with Masane's declaration, but decided not to voice his uncertainty about his relation to Rihoko when he caught the slight twitch of her head, a subtle message telling him to go along with her story. Fortunately for the duo, the superintendent missed their little interaction as his focus was centered on the two officers. Said cops looked as if they were going to piss themselves from the fierce look their superior officer was shooting them. Officer Saizo releases Mr. Uzumaki at once. The man's tone was cold and emotionless, yet was able to convey how infuriated he was at the same time. Saizo's partner, however, still didn't fully understand the amount of trouble they were in. "But sir, you can't honestly be. Shut your mouth, catnip, before I permanently shut it for you. You and your partner have brought nothing but dishonor to our precinct with your constant racism. The both of you were transferred from your old precinct because you falsely imprisoned an American tourist under the allegations of being a spy. A spy. Do you know what makes our country's police force look bad? Or how that affects Japan's international relationships as a whole? Do you? And yet here you two are, trying to arrest yet another innocent person, just because he fits your despicable racial profile." The uniformed officer's smoldering glare then shot back to Saizo. "Saizo. Why are you still clutching at Mr. Uzumaki's shirt? Get your filthy hands off of him before I have you incarcerated for abuse of authoritative power and insubordination." Saizo's hands quickly released Naruto's shirt as if he were touching hot coals before he fell in line with catnip. By now, both officers were standing ramrod straight at attention as their superior continued to glare at them. He turned away from them briefly to give a deep bow to Naruto. "I apologize profusely for what my subordinates have put you through, Mr. Uzumaki. Please do not think that these fools speak for the entire police force of Japan, nor that we condone such hateful beliefs. I assure you, these two will be punished severely for their actions. I'll be sure to hold you to that," said Naruto tightly. He could tell that the superintendent meant every word, but he was still angry with how the country's public servants had treated him. So instead, he allowed Masane to lead him away as the superintendent began to give catnip and Saizo a verbal tongue lashing they would never forget. "Are you alright? Those two didn't hurt you, did they?" asked Masane, once she was sure that they were far away from the police. Naruto just sent her a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, I'm fine. You actually came in right on time before that prick." "Hey, watch the language. Don't curse in front of the baby," interjected Masane, giving his ear a quick flick. "Ow. But she's asleep. Doesn't matter. I don't want Rihoko picking up those kinds of words from your potty mouth, right? Sorry. You came in right on time before that jerk would cuff me. Are the police here really this aggressive, or am I just a special case? They seem to be really out to get me for some reason." Masane just stared at him incredulously for a moment before she had to remind herself that some cases of amnesia were more severe than others. "Well, it may be because of the color of your hair and eyes, Naruto. I hate to be the one to tell you this, but the average Japanese man doesn't naturally have blue eyes or blonde hair. In fact, if it weren't for your dialect, I would have guessed that you were an American. Not that it's a bad thing or anything. It's just that the Japanese have a strong sense of patriotism, and some of them aren't that open-minded to people that are of a different nationality, or at least look like they are, especially when it comes to marriage. If a Japanese person were to marry someone from a different country, for example, then the couple would sometimes be looked down upon by their peers." "Wow, that sounds pretty racist if you ask me. So, where do you stand on the matter?" "Well, personally, I could really care less about a person's nationality, just so long as they're kind and friendly people. And if two people with differing national backgrounds marry each other, I say that, as long as it's two people that care about each other, more power to them. Ethnicity shouldn't be the deciding factor on whom you fall in love with," she said with total conviction. "Nice to know that you're not one of those traditional stick-in-the-muds," said Naruto, before a short awkward silence settled in between them. "So, what was the deal back there? What are you talking about?" Naruto just curled an eyebrow as he looked at Masane. "I'm talking about when you said to that superintendent that I was your baby's daddy." He had to admit, seeing Masane blush and act all flustered made her look really cute. And for some reason, her behavior seemed to remind him of someone else that acted in a similar manner. "Well, you see, I mean that I had to come up with something convincing so that they would back off. And I just figured that if I told them that you were Rihoko's father, then they wouldn't really look into your case," she explained. Naruto just gazed at her, surprised that she would willingly go to such lengths to help him. "Well, thank you for helping me back there. To tell you the truth, I never took you as the type of person that would willingly lie to the police." Masane suddenly looked down at her feet, confusing the blonde. Well, would it really be a bad thing if you were Rihoko's father?" she said, her voice almost a whisper. That immediately got Naruto's full attention, his eyes widening at what he heard. "What did you say?" "I said, would you really be against being Rihoko's father?" she asked again, looking into his eyes in a pleading manner. Before he could answer, she spoke again. "I know that I'm sounding very demanding asking you this, and that I'm practically dropping this huge responsibility on you without any warning, but I could really use your help. Even though I'm her mother, there's only so much that I can do. She needs a father in her life. I mean, you don't really have any idea on what you're going to do now, especially since you've lost most of your memories, right? Well, why not stay with us? Who knows, maybe you'll be able to regain what you've lost if you stay. And besides, if the cops see that you're with a family, then they won't think that you're some sort of illegal immigrant or some lost tourist. Please, I know that I have no right asking all of this from you, but could you at the very least consider the possibility? Naruto was stunned into silence. Sure, what Masane was asking of him seemed demanding, but for reasons unexplainable, he couldn't find the will to be angry with her. And once again, visions of the small boy being shunned and glared at by the mob of adults and older kids flooded his mind. But then, those images were replaced by one that showed the same boy watching at a distance as families celebrated some sort of ceremony outside of what looked like a school building. Again, he felt a strong sense of nostalgia from the mental image, but he couldn't understand why. Maybe what Masane suggested could be true, maybe if he stayed with them, he could get back the memories that he had lost. But then, doubt began to claw its way into his mind. He didn't know anything about being a parent, let alone if he even had any when he was a kid. How could someone like him be capable of raising a child, especially if he hardly had any grasp of his own identity? But why me? He asked in a small voice that must have sounded completely out of character for him. Out of all the people here, Masane, why would you want me to be Rihoko's father? I mean, I practically have no memory of what my life was like before I met you. Aside from my own name, I don't know which city I was born in, the type of people I was friends with, or whether or not I even had parents to begin with. For Kami's sake, I thought that the helicopter was some kind of monster. I could be some sort of insane psychopath for all I know. There are so many other guys better suited than me to help you, and Rihoko, so why would you even want me of all people to be your baby's father? Masane just gazed at him for a brief moment before she smiled. Because you were the only one that was there when we needed help. You calmed down Rihoko when I couldn't. You kept me from losing my head when I was about to have a panic attack. You gave me the confidence to be Rihoko's mother when I was still thinking about giving her to the orphanage the first chance I got. A real psychopath wouldn't have bothered helping us. Naruto, despite what you may think of yourself, I can tell that you're a kind person. But what if that's just the amnesia affecting me? This Mr. Nice Guy personality could be just some false persona that I owe. Naruto really didn't expect that finger flick to his forehead, nor for her to be that fast. Are you even listening to yourself? It's like you can't take a compliment or something. Stop beating yourself up over nothing. I can tell that you're a good person, and so can Rihoko. If you were as bad as you say you are, then she would have been bawling her eyes out like crazy. Plus, she already seems to have taken a liking to you, and you wouldn't want to just leave after making such an impression on her, would you? And it's like you said before, we amnesiacs have to stick together, right? Naruto was taken aback at having his own words used on him. He could feel the barriers that he had put up gradually deteriorate from Masane's constant verbal bombardments. And it didn't really help him keep his resolve that he just seemed to get caught in those deep pools of hazel that were her eyes. Truth be told, he actually felt at ease whenever he was around her, as if his resolve was strengthened tenfold and he could face anything that he encountered with her by his side. But, he thought he should still give her one last warning before he made his decision. You know, you could be taking a very huge risk with me, one that you might later regret. He said solemnly. Masane only smiled as she placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. There are always risks in life, it's all a matter of finding those that are worth taking. And from what I've seen, you're definitely worth the risk. Before Naruto could reply, a small yawn was heard coming from Masane's arm. Looking down at where the source of the noise came from, Naruto saw that Rihoko had finally woken up and was staring at him owlishly. Smiling, Naruto bent down so that he was closer to the baby's face. Hey there, little Rihoko. Looks like I'm going to be your new daddy. What do you think about that, he asked softly, to which Rihoko merely giggled. Naruto smiled as he got back to his feet, facing a smiling Masane once again. So, it looks like I'll be sticking around with the two of you from now on, huh? Masane smirked playfully at the blonde. It sure does, Whiskers. Naruto frowned slightly at the nickname before he broke into a small chuckle at Masane's choice of a nickname. So what if he couldn't remember his old life? At least he wouldn't have to recover from his amnesia alone. Anarchy. Chaos. Disarray. This was what it always felt like whenever he slept. Thousands of voices talking loudly at the same time, image after image flashing through his mind. What little he could decipher from the jumbled mess that were his dreams sounded strangely familiar, as if he should have remembered them for some reason or another. Occasionally, he was blessed with relaxing, blissful tranquility as he slept, but these instances didn't occur as often as he had hoped. Nonetheless, he preferred the anarchy over the nightmares that seemed to sporadically come about more frequently, much to his chagrin. Whereas the chaotic noise was bearable at best, the night terrors always left him mentally exhausted and somewhat reluctant to fall back to sleep. The worst part was that every single one of his nightmares, including the one he was having right now, all depicted the same scenario time and time again. It started off with him appearing as a 7-year-old in some weird village that looked as if it belonged in ancient times, yet for some strange reason, he could see electrical wires throughout the area. The laughter of children echoed all around him, but it seemed louder in the area in front of him. He would always try to find out exactly who or what was making the noise, and every single time, that was when all hell broke loose. The scene would twist and contort until the sunny and cheerful environment was replaced with one more dark and foreboding. Night would replace day, as usual, and a large mob of glaring adults would surround him without any warning. They were always armed, whether it was with garden tools or actual weapons. A few of the mobsters were wearing green vests that had pockets on their front and wore a metal-plated headband that was similar to his on their heads. These were the worst members of the mob, as they were actually armed with knives and swords. It didn't matter what the people were armed with, for they were all used to mercilessly beat him into a bloody pulp, just like they always did, all the while spewing out hateful words such as demon, abomination, or murder. That just left him completely confused. Why would a group of adults call a child such despicable names, let alone form a lynch mob trying to kill said child? Before the leader of the mob could strike the final blow, the entire scene blurred into darkness until his vision was restored to a completely different scene. This time he found himself as a 12-year-old, dressed in a bright orange jumpsuit of all things, and standing in some sort of secluded clearing that was surrounded by trees. In front of him were 3 wooden posts embedded in the ground. This new scenario was somewhat new, as it was the second most frequent image that occurred in his nightmares. And once again, his solitude was abruptly interrupted by 11 blurry figures that were about his height, surrounding him. Further away, there were 4 adult-sized blurs standing together, as if they were observing the other blurs and himself. "Why do you have to be so troublesome?" drawled a lazy male voice, coming from one of the smaller blurs. "DCH, yeah, everything goes wrong whenever you're around," snarked another male's voice, sounding quite arrogant. "Tommy, you're such a useless idiot." This time it was a female's voice, and one that was very loud. "Fate is determined that you will always amount to nothing," called another male's voice that was somehow even more arrogant than the last one. "Ibaka. Why must you always ruin everything for me? I wish that you'd leave and never come back," screamed another female's voice, being the loudest one he's heard so far. And for some inexplicable reason, that exclamation seemed to have hurt more than all the rest. "HN, just accept the facts, dope. You'll never be able to surpass me. You will always be seen as the pitiful dead last that you are, compared to an elite such as myself." Now he was starting to lose patience. He had no clue as to who these people were or how they knew him, but they were starting to really piss him off. His flames of youth burn brightly, but he's seriously lacking as far as the basics are considered, said one of the adult-sized blurs. The flames of youth comment took him by surprise. Just who the hell talks like that? I'm actually surprised that he made it this far, considering just how pitiful his scores were in the academy, said the second adult blur. Like the first one, its voice hinted that it was a male. His eyebrow twitched at hearing the harsh criticism, as an unexplainable feeling of resentment began to burn. Just what were they thinking, allowing him to graduate? As he is right now, he'd be nothing but a liability to his teammates and himself. This time it was a woman's voice that came from one of the blues. The way it sounded so condescending towards him made his blood boil. Who did she think she was, talking down to him in such a manner? But it was the final male voice's comment that proved to be the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. Never before have I had the displeasure of being responsible for such a disappointing student. What little self-restraint he had left was torn to shreds like wet tissue paper. Hearing such arrogant dismissals from these faceless people was downright infuriating. Even if he did know them from somewhere, he wouldn't have allowed them to treat him as if he were trash. With an enraged roar, he charged towards the adult-sized blurs, intent on giving the 4 the beating of a lifetime. But, as his fist was about to make contact, the blurs and the surrounding area disintegrated into dust, leaving nothing but a silent black void in its place. Everywhere he looked, he could see nothing but pitch black darkness, with the only sound being his own agitated breathing. Then, without warning, a massive jolt of excruciating pain exploded throughout his body, originating around the upper right side of his chest. The pain was so severe that he felt his already limited vision begin to blur. Yet, despite the urge to allow unconsciousness to take over, he somehow knew that doing so would be the same as allowing whoever this new attacker was to finish him off for good. So, struggling against the agony with every fiber of his being, he managed to refocus his blurry eyesight enough so that he could see what attacked him. But when he finally got a good look, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Instead of a sword, a spear, or any other type of stabbing weapon, it was a human's arm that had pierced through his chest, punched a hole in his right lung, and exited his back. Tracing the arm back to its owner, he was met with the sight of a boy around his age. The stranger had black hair, was dressed in a blue high-collar shirt and white cargo shorts, and was holding him up by the collar of his jacket. Like the two earlier scenarios, the boy's facial features were blurred to the point that only his eyes and mouth were visible. But unlike the other dream specters, this boy had a more demonic appearance. His mouth was set in a deranged smile, his eyes were glowing red, and the entire left side of his face was covered in black markings, giving off the illusion that the skin was decaying. With a quick jerk, the facially deformed boy yanked his arm out of his chest before the same arm clasped around his neck in an effort to strangle him to death. "How pathetic," boomed a deep voice. There, levitating above the homicidal boy, was a large red eye with a narrow black slit as its pupil. Surrounding the eye was a large pulsating miasma that was dark red in color to the point that it was almost black. The dark surrounding energy was moving, as if it were on fire. Even when the truth is before your eyes, you still prefer to delude yourself into believing in your fantasies. Just how long do you intend to ignore reality? Suddenly, the miasma expanded and began to burn at a more erratic rate. The eye remained the same, but was accompanied by another eye similar in appearance, along with what looked like a snout filled with long, sharp teeth. The demon boy and the injuries he caused vanished as if they were never there, but that did nothing to lighten the situation. The beastly visage sneered down at him, its teeth glinting with malicious intent. Despite all of your boasts of strength and skills, you still end up humiliating yourself in front of your peers. You fail miserably at the simplest of tasks, constantly having to rely on others to come to your aid. It's only by relying on my might that you can actually stand a chance of accomplishing anything. And even with my aid, you still come up short. Stop fooling yourself with your idiotic fallacies. Accept the truth that you are nothing without me, and that any attempt to live without my power will lead to your destruction. Before he could say anything to refute the demonic visage's claims, the miasma surrounding it expanded once again, the lower portion creeping towards the ground. As the pulsating red mass slithered towards his position, he tried to get away, but his body wasn't listening to his commands. He wanted to run, to get as far away from what every fiber of his being was telling him was the living embodiment of evil, yet it felt as if his legs were petrified. But just as the red mass was about to make contact, a bright red-orange flash erupted from his right wrist. The sudden action halted the aura's approach and even managed to cause it to retreat a short distance, but the burning pain shooting through his entire body made him wonder if the new phenomenon was any better than the red miasma. But the malevolent vermilion energy didn't stay still for long as it surged forward in a second attempt to attack him. Yet, for some odd reason, the bright light provided some form of resistance against the invasive agent. Despite the interference, the blood-red essence continued to fight against the light that prevented its movement, causing both entities to enter a dire stalemate, with neither force gaining any ground. This new clashing of energies was the least of his troubles, as an intense burning sensation began to pool around his arm, before it quickly began to travel down the limb towards the rest of his body. The pain was unbearable, it was like he was being submerged in molten lava. As the pain intensified, he thought that he could hear something that sounded like a child, but he only managed to hear it as a whisper. "Come on. Wake up." The whisper began to increase in volume, becoming more comprehensible with each syllable. Even with agonizing pain coursing through his entire being, he could make out that someone was calling him, someone familiar. "Naruto. MOTB. Come on, you guys, wake up. You both are going to miss seeing it," said a girl, exasperation clear in her tone. The child was dressed in a white short-sleeved shirt that was underneath a blue tank top, a dark pink skirt, white socks that came up to her calves, and pink shoes. There were pink butterfly designs on the top and skirt, and she had black hair that reached to her lower neck, yet she had two thin strands of hair tied up into small pigtails. Her normally bright brown eyes were narrowed in slight agitation, focused on the two adults that were crouched down on the deck of the boat that they were all riding on, curled into a ball, still asleep and oblivious to their surroundings. "Mom, wake up. You said that you just wanted to take a short nap so that you could be well rested when we reach New Tokyo," said the girl, giving the woman's shoulder a nudge. "Ugh, no more stupid beatboxing, chipmunk," groaned the woman, "just let's sleep more." "But mom, sometimes you're impossible to deal with." The girl then turned to the man. "Dad, mom won't wake up. She's going to miss everything." But the man remained still, showing how much of a heavy sleeper he was. Dismayed, the girl stared at the two adults, trying to wake them up with her stare alone. Both of them had a stubborn nature to them, especially when it came to sleep, but the girl wasn't discouraged in the slightest. After all, she had been through situations similar to the one she was currently experiencing plenty of times before. And she already knew what would finally awaken the two sleeping adults without fail. "Masane and Naruto," she shouted. The effect was immediate as the man and woman jumped in fright, finally awake. "Raiko, was that really necessary?" asked the woman as she stood up, stretching the stiffness out of her back. She was wearing a thick orange jacket, form-fitting jeans, and a pair of heeled shoes. Rihoko, or Raiko, for short, just smiled. You told me that you wanted to see the sights before we got to New Tokyo, but you were sleeping like a log. And Dad was still sleeping, even though he said that he'd be awake half an hour ago. Besides, you promised to tell me about what old Tokyo was like before the Great Quake, remember? Masane tried to think of a comeback, but nothing came to her. Alright, you got me there. But next time, don't give up on the gentler approach so quickly, alright. She then turned to the blond man that was stretching his back to the point that audible creaks were heard. He was dressed in a black jacket, which was open to show that he was wearing a light orange shirt underneath. He also wore a pair of skinny black pants and a pair of black Converse sneakers. And what's with you, Naruto? You've never been much of a deep sleeper, the sound of a pin dropping would have been enough to wake you up. You're not coming down with anything, are you? Naruto sent the brunette a small smile as he stretched the stiffness out his arms. Nah, I'm fine, Masane. I'm probably just tired from all of this traveling. Plus, this boat isn't really making things easier for me. Masane smirked at the blonde, who had thought that the great Naruto would be done in by a small case of seasickness. She teased. Naruto stared evenly at her, but his expression quickly shifted into a more devious one. Or, my discomfort could stem from the fact that a certain someone and their bubble butt decided to use me as a temporary feudant. He reveled in the shocked expression on her face and the sputtering sound she made before she sent a dangerous glare back at him. I'll have you know, mister, that I do not have a bubble butt. My behind is well rounded, thank you very much. Naruto leered perversely, pulling her into his arms. Oh, believe me, it is very well rounded. He said in a low baritone voice, sending an excited chill down the woman's spine. You're such a perverted fox, you know that, right? Said Masane pointedly, lightly flicking him on the nose. Only when it comes to you, vixen. He whispered, causing Masane's grumpy facade to break apart, a smile forming on her beautiful visage as she allowed him to pull her flush against his body. Their lips were but inches apart when, Mom, Dad, come take a look at this, shouted Ryuhoko. The two adults jolted apart, their moment abruptly disrupted. But the look that Masane gave him told him that they would resume where they had left off at a later time. As Naruto watched Masane go to see what Ryuhoko was talking about, the blonde couldn't help but reminisce on the past experiences they had shared and what had brought the trio to their current situation. On were the two shaken and unsure teenagers, and in their place stood two young adults. In the past 6 years, he had stretched to a startling height of 6 feet. His face had become more thin and angular, his hair still wild and spiky. He was also more muscular, something Masane didn't hesitate to point out as a result of working on construction sites and other jobs that require heavy lifting. One thing that remained constant for the blonde, however, was his exemplary reflexes and hand-to-hand combat abilities. He didn't know exactly how he had gotten them, but it made things easier for him whenever he got into tough situations, which happened more often than he would have liked, since several Japanese citizens often had mistaken him for an American at first glance. Masane had gone through several changes as well. The passage of time had made her even more beautiful than when she was a teenager, her still growing figure becoming one that many women envied. Her breasts had grown to a large D-cup size, and her rounded hips had become even more defined. It took every ounce of self-restraint for Naruto not to blush or stare whenever he saw her. Unfortunately, Masane's beauty also garnered a lot of unwanted attention from other men as well. Her once shy attitude had become more playful and cheerful, but her stubbornness remained strong, which was more than enough to send any man that got too fresh with her packing. Together, they took care of and raised their daughter as best they could with their limited resources. At first, they had some trouble adjusting to parenthood, and they did have a few fights every now and then, but they always managed to forgive each other and resolve whatever problems they had. It's hard to believe that our little baby grew up into the little girl in front of me. I still can't get over how quickly she's grown. Thought Naruto, watching as Masane talked to Ryuhoko, pointing at something in the distance. He noticed a glare of light reflecting off of Masane's left hand, more specifically, her left ring finger, which was adorned with a silver wedding ring. Naruto couldn't help but smile as he looked down at his own wedding ring that fitted snugly on his own finger. And who would have thought that Masane and I would actually get married, especially in such a hectic time like this. But then again, I wouldn't have it any other way. At first, Naruto had simply written off his budding feelings for Masane as platonic on the grounds that she was the first person he had met the day he had lost his memories and that he was helping her raise Ryuhoko. But as time went on, his feelings for her intensified with each passing day. He had never told Masane about how he truly felt, in fear that his confession would have made things too awkward between the two of them. It only made things worse for the blonde whenever he saw other guys flirting with a young woman. He had to restrain himself in the past from beating up the numerous men that looked at her like a wolf would with a sheep, only resorting to violence whenever they encountered a few men that couldn't take no for an answer. Naruto thought that he was going to snap from keeping his own feelings for Masane under restraint whilst watching her interact with other men, knowing that he couldn't stop her if she really wanted to pursue a relationship with one of her many beaux. But it all came to a head 3 days after Rihoko's second birthday. MOTB. Flashback. That was late at night and Rihoko was fast asleep in the temporary hotel room that the trio was currently staying in. The building was in serious disrepair, as were several of the other surrounding buildings, showing just how devastating the Great Quake was for all of Japan. The trio had 3 more days in the hotel before they had to move out and find another place to stay. But that wasn't the most pressing matter at the moment. No, the current problem that Naruto was facing involved Masane, who was sitting on a chair facing one of the room's windows, pretending that he wasn't there at all. "Masane, please, don't be like this," pleaded Naruto, only to be met with silence. She had been silent since late afternoon. Ever since that incident, she had refrained from talking to him as much as she could, only answering in short terse responses when it was necessary. "Oh come on, how long are you going to be like this? Just stop it, Naruto. I'm already mad at you for that little stunt you pulled out on the streets, don't make things even worse for yourself," snapped Masane. "Oh for the love of, are you still going on about that?" asked Naruto, exasperatedly. "Well, yes, Naruto. I am still going on about how you practically cost me a job that paid more than that stupid dishwashing job at that damn seafood restaurant and that blasted job at the dry cleaners combined," replied Masane, keeping her voice as quiet as she could so as not to wake the sleeping child in the bedroom. For the umpteenth time, Masane, there was never a job to begin with. That man was nothing but a human trafficker looking for potential targets. Oh, here we go again. It's time for Naruto Uzumaki's famous 10 easy ways to identify rapists and kidnappers lecture. As if hearing it the last 9 times wasn't enough. Honestly, you've got to be one of the most paranoid men I've ever encountered. With good reason. I've heard countless stories from the guys I work with, Masane, and they're all the same. Wives, daughters, and sisters lured away from their families with promises of high-paying jobs, only to never be seen again. And in some of the worst cases, their bodies are found laying in the streets or alleyways. Hell, I've seen people that exhibited the same behaviors akin to rapists, kidnappers, and violent sociopaths at the construction sites and loading docks. One of them was leering at you a few feet away from where you were having your little conversation with Ryuga, if that was even his real name. I was there at the skyscraper construction site when that bastard, Genma, was fired for nearly beating another worker to death, all because the man accidentally spilled beer on the guy's shirt. That could have been a coincidence. Just because that lowlife was there doesn't mean that he had any connection with Ryuga. And that didn't give you the right to threaten him for simply talking to me. The guy was practically herding you towards where Genma was waiting, what was I supposed to do? The glare Masane sent him was so cold that he couldn't help but shudder. Okay, maybe it was one big coincidence, but it was just too big of a risk. Look, I know that sometimes we have to do some questionable work in order to better provide for our little girl, but that doesn't mean that you have to jump at every job offer that's presented to you. But we don't have the luxury of choosing which job to accept or decline, Naruto. We both have absolutely no recollections of our pasts, and we're constantly on the run from the NSFW. None of those things inspire confidence in employers when applying for work. So it's better to just accept whatever job is available from anyone that's offering, no questions asked. That's just asking for people to take advantage of us. They just work us to the bone and then pay a quarter of what they owe us, and that's if they even pay us at all. And if we try to confront them, they could make us compliant under the threat of calling the NSFW. And don't even get me started on how those scumbag employers act towards female applicants. Oh, don't you start with that again, Naruto. I know all about the guys who like to harass the women that work for them, okay? I can take care of myself. I'm not some defenseless woman that needs a man to watch over her shoulder every time she interacts with some other guy. And what's that supposed to mean? Asked Naruto. Masane just stared at him, disbelievingly. Are you kidding me? Every single time you see me talking to another man, you act all paranoid around the guy, like he's going to violate me the first moment he gets. And in about 90% of those encounters, you either threaten them with violence or downright beat them up. Maybe if they actually made eye contact with you whilst they talked, instead of letting their eyes wander, I wouldn't have to pound them. Just who do you think you are, eh? You can't decide whether or not I can talk to other men. You're not my husband. Well, I want to be. Naruto's eyes widened in disbelief the moment those words left his mouth. For 2 years, he had kept his true feelings for the brunette to himself, in fear that they would jeopardize his friendship with her. And yet, he'd just let it slip like it was some trivial fact. The shell-shocked look on Masane's face only further strengthened his belief that he had just ruined the only stable relationship in his life. What? Masane all but whispered. It's forget it. Just forget what I said, it's nothing. said Naruto, desperately hoping that Masane wouldn't press further into the matter. "Oh, no, you don't. You're not getting off that easily," she retorted, her normal headstrong personality returning at full force. "Masane, please, could you just— Naruto Uzumaki, don't you dare try to weasel yourself out of this. We made a promise with each other that we would always talk whenever something was bothering one of us, that we wouldn't keep our problems to ourselves. And if I remember correctly, you told me that you never went back on your word, no matter what. So you are going to tell me, once and for all, why you're acting like this? Why does it bother you so much to see me so much as talk to another guy that you practically flip out? Why, Naruto, Because I love you, okay?" Naruto couldn't take it anymore, what with Masane's badgering and the stress from blurting out one of his dreams, he just had to tell her. He knew that he couldn't keep the truth from Masane any longer, her stubbornness wouldn't have allowed it. The two became silent in fear that their shouting had woken Rihoko up. That was never a pleasant experience, it always took a long time to get her back to sleep. Luckily, that wasn't the case for the two young parents, since they could still hear the soft snores of their little girl from the bedroom. Seeing as they weren't in any immediate danger of an upset daughter, the two returned to their previous predicament. "I don't know when it happened, maybe it was when you stood up for me against those two racist cops, or from the first moment I'd laid eyes on you, but I knew that you were special. The fact that you defended a complete stranger against the police is a wonder in itself. But with each passing day, I realized that I was falling more and more in love with you. The way you laugh, the way Rihoko would always smile whenever she saw you, how you look twice as beautiful when you smile, even with how stubborn you can be once you've set your mind on something. You could have just about any guy that you want, what with your looks and personality. I mean, there's just so many other guys out there that could better provide for you and Rihoko, and I know that I should always have our daughter's well-being in mind, but just the thought of you and our daughter living with another man is just too unbearable to think about. Each time I see a well-dressed man talking to you, I feel as if I'm going to see you and Rihoko for the very last time. I know that I shouldn't be so jealous, and that staying with me would most likely result in a life of living in slums and eating junk food for you both, but I just can't help it. It's as if I'm committing suicide, as if it goes against every fiber of my being by letting some other guy share his life with you. Even though I must sound like the most selfish douche to you, Naruto didn't have a chance to finish as Masane launched herself at him, the blonde catching hold of her in his arms in an instant, managing to stop themselves from crashing onto the floor. He was about to ask what was wrong when Masane grasped his cheeks and pulled his head in for a soul-searing kiss. Naruto was shocked senseless, his emotions whirling around his mind like a tornado. He tried to make sense of the conflicting thoughts clouding his head before he finally decided not to think about it and tried to convey the emotions he had suppressed for so long into the kiss. The two relished their shared embrace as long as they could before they had to break apart in order to breathe. "Naruto, although you're the most reliable person I've ever known, you can also be the densest man on the face of the planet," said Masane as she gently stroked his whiskered cheeks, smirking as Naruto made a face reminiscent of a content fox. "Did you ever stop to think as to why I rejected every one of those men that tried to sweep me off my feet? It was because I had already found the perfect guy." Naruto's eyes snapped out of his daze, startled at what he had heard. "What? Are you saying that?" "Yes, you big goof," giggled Masane. "I love you, too." The shocked expression on the blonde's face was just too cute to the brunette, but she became concerned once he started imitating a statue. She was about to ask if he was alright before Naruto's lips collided passionately against hers. This time, it was Masane's turn to be surprised by her partner's sudden actions before she reciprocated the emotions the blonde was conveying. This time it was Naruto who broke the kiss, his eyes burning with a fire that Masane had never seen before. "Only in my dreams have I ever thought that I would hear you say those words, Masane. You and Rihoko have always kept me going whenever I felt like giving up. As long as I have both of you in my life, I feel like I can take on anything the world throws at me," said Naruto as he gently placed the woman back on the ground. She was confused by the action until her eyes widened in surprise when Naruto clasped one of her hands in his own and crouched down onto one knee. "Masane Amaha, you are the most beautiful, most amazing woman I have ever met. I know that things between us haven't always been easy and that we've had our disagreements, but can honestly say that I wouldn't have it any other way. I want to spend the rest of my life with you and our daughter. Would you marry me?" Masane said nothing, her eyes gazing down at him in disbelief, her remaining hand covering her mouth to stifle her startled cries. Naruto said nothing, preferring to stay silent. But with each passing second, dread slowly began to make its way to his heart. Did he come across too strongly? Did he make the jump too soon? All in all, the possibility that he had ruined things between him and Masane was becoming more and more evident. "Yes." Naruto's eyes shot up to hers, shock written across his face as he noticed that Masane's eyes were tearing up. He knew that he had hurt her clearly, but at the same time, he had trouble believing what she had said. "Excuse me?" Masane pulled her hand away from her mouth, revealing her smile. "Yes, I will marry you," she said, as a lone tear traveled down her cheek. "You will?" asked Naruto, his elation matched by his surprise. "I will," answered Masane, her tears of joy flowing more freely. "I will." Thanks for watching my video, leave a like if you enjoyed my video and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. See you next time, till then sayonara.